What's going on, guys? I want to show you guys what a maxed out caught again. 3, 2, 1. What's going on, guys? In this video I want to show you guys what a maxed out Philosopher class is like. There's more outward videos available on this channel, so make sure to check them out. And if you guys like rock or metal music, check out my band In Vice Versa from Bangkok, Thailand. Links will be below in the description. So if you're interested in completing the Philosopher skill tree, you're going to need around 2,000 silver, give or take. It's kind of similar to all the other classes. And if you're interested in being a Philosopher, you're most likely interested in using Chakrams. And as you guys can see in my offhand right here is a floating metal disc, and that's what a Chakram is like. And to use a Chakram, your character basically uses his mind to shoot the Chakram forward and do damage to your enemies. So Chakram skills take around, I think, 3 skill slots out of the 9 total skills in the Philosopher tree. So if you want to utilize the entire Philosopher tree, you're going to be using all 3 of these skills, and they're pretty cool, so I'll show you guys what they look like. Okay, so the first thing you got to do is actually purchase a Chakram, and you can go ahead and buy that in any of the cities or towns from the weapon merchant. And the basic one is about 90 silver, which is a fairly decent Chakram. It's the one I'm using right now. And if you guys see some of the traveling merchants in the world, they can sell Chakrams that are up to 2,000 silver, and they're pretty sick looking. So if you guys are rich, go ahead and get yourself one of those. So before you guys can actually use any of the 3 Chakram skills available in the tree, you have to have something called the Discipline Boon. And right across the little boardwalk right here is the Monk Trainer. And she sells 2 skills, one of them called Focus and one of them called Brace. When you cast these abilities, both of them give you the Discipline Boon for, I believe both of them are for 240 seconds. So the easiest way to gain the Discipline Boon is just by going ahead and casting Focus. So I'll show you guys what Focus looks like right now. It's as simple as that. You can cast it inside combat or outside of combat, it doesn't matter. It gives you the Discipline Boon for about 4 minutes. It has an 8-minute cooldown though, so once your 4 minutes runs up, you're not going to be able to use the Chakram abilities until the other 4 minutes on the cooldown is done for Focus, and then you can recast it. However, you can use the other ability, which is called Brace, but Brace is an ability that you have to use while in combat, so you have to have a melee weapon equipped. And I'll show you guys on the tree here what it says. So for Brace, it blocks an attack, restoring your stability and giving you the Discipline Boon. All nearby enemies are knocked back. So when an enemy attacks you, you simply cast the Brace spell. It looks like this. Right when they swing their sword, you cast that, and you're given the Discipline Boon for another 4 minutes as well. The cooldown for Brace is only 200 seconds versus the 8 minutes that Focus takes, but Brace you actually have to cast in combat. So sometimes I'll cast Focus, sometimes I'll cast Brace depending on the situation. And then you're ready to unleash hell with your Chakrams. Okay, so let's get into the good stuff now, which is the Chakram spells. And we're going to start off in the skill tree in the bottom left here with the first Chakram ability called the Chakram Pierce. And in a minute I'll show you guys what it looks like in combat and outside of combat as well. So obviously the requirement is you have to have a Chakram and you have to have the Discipline Boon activated. And it launches a disc forward, possibly hitting the enemy twice. So this attack is more of a single target damage attack, and its mana cost is only 5 and the cooldown's every 6 seconds, so you're going to be using this attack quite a lot. So here's an example of the Chakram Pierce outside of combat. And here's me using it in combat. Okay, so the second Chakram ability, which I believe is also 50 silver, possibly 100, is called the Chakram Arc, and this requires the Discipline Boon as well. It's an area attack where the disc sweeps the area in front of the caster, dealing damage and impact. It costs 8 mana and has a 12-second cooldown, so you can't use it as much as the Pierce. But if you got multiple enemies around you, go ahead and cast it, and sometimes it will knock the enemies back if you break their impact bar, and it will do a little bit of damage to each of them, not as much as the Pierce, which is a single target damage, but it's a good way to cast something when you got multiple enemies on you and your Pierce is on a cooldown. Okay, so here's an example of the Chakram Arc outside of combat. And here's the Arc inside combat. Here we go. The third Chakram ability, and the most expensive and the coolest looking one, is the Chakram Dance. This skill actually costs 600 silver, so you have to save up for it, but it's definitely worth it. So this attack has the disc sway left and right as it advances, hitting multiple times and dealing high damage. It costs 20 mana and has a 2-minute cooldown. This one definitely does the most damage out of the Chakram abilities, but it also costs the most mana and has the highest cooldown. So you're going to use this on more important targets or in like a save your ass type of situation. So here's an example of the Chakram dance outside of combat. And here it is in combat. Okay, so now let's talk about the other skills that are offered in the Philosopher tree. We'll start off with the Mana Ward, which is in the bottom right here. It costs 7 mana, has a 20-second cooldown, envelops you in mana, and for an instant you become immune to damage. It can be combined with other spells for powerful effects. So if you cast the Mana Ward alone, it protects you from damage for, I think it's 5 seconds. So it can be really useful if you need quick protection. If you use the Mana Ward with something called the Sigil of Ice, which is at the top skill right here, you'll get an AoE damage, ice damage type effect, which is pretty sweet, and I will definitely show an example of that. So here is the Mana Ward by itself. And here's an example of the Mana Ward cast in combat within the Sigil of Ice. Okay, so now we're going to skip to the very top of the tree since we kind of just talked about the Sigil of Ice. So when you cast the Sigil of Ice, it creates a magical circle of ice around you, and certain skills will have additional effects within the circle. An example of that is casting the Mana Ward within the Sigil of Ice. It makes the Mana Ward become an AoE explosion. To cast the Sigil of Ice, it does require 1 cold stone, and you can find these as a drop, or you can craft them in your crafting menu. To craft a cold stone, you need blue sand, and you also need a mana stone. And blue sand you can find on the beaches of Sirtso, and probably some other places. And a mana stone you can find at Mount Conflux or other caves, or you can buy it from a merchant. So, I mean, some of these ingredients are kind of hard to come across from, so you don't just want to be burning Sigils of Ice constantly unless you actually have the materials for it, but it's super powerful when you combine it with things like Mana Ward. And if anybody watching this knows what other abilities from other classes have an effect within the Sigil of Ice, definitely put it in the comments below because it'd be interesting to hear. So the last active skill in the Philosopher skill tree is the Sigil of Fire, and it's basically the same thing as the Sigil of Ice, except you cast a circle of fire around yourself. It's similar in that certain spells and abilities will have additional effects when you cast them within the circle of fire. One such spell is the Spark, which everybody should have if you obtain a mana pool. So I'll show an example of the Sigil of Fire with a Spark cast on an enemy, because it creates a fireball as opposed to just the weak low spark. The 2 final skill boxes are passive skills, and the middle one is the breakthrough point, the chain line that you need the breakthrough point to get through, and it's called Leyline Connection. You regain 0.15 mana per second, and this is a constant effect. So this one costs 500 silver and will open up the top of the Philosopher class for you to be able to purchase those abilities. And it's really good. You slowly regain mana, and it's just a big help when you do anything magic in the game at all. And the second passive skill is at the very top, and this one's called Fire Affinity. And it's pretty basic. It increases your resistance to fire by 20, and the fire damage you inflict is increased by 15%. So when you're in the Philosopher class, though, once you've bought all the skills and you're finally at the top, you can only buy the Sigil of Ice or the Fire Affinity. You have to make a choice. So if you're gonna do a lot of fire magic, then go ahead and get yourself the fire affinity so you have that nice passive buff when you're using your attacks. If you're not really into fire magic, which I'm not really into it, I've got myself the sigil of ice so I can do more ice-based attacks because I think that's what I would prefer. Okay, so that's really it for the Philosopher class. If you like using chakrams or like using fire or ice magic, then this is probably a class for you. Right across the little boardwalk right here is the monk trainer, and a lot of his skills go well with the Philosopher. So these are two classes that go well together if you want to deck them both out. Thanks for watching. More guides and videos will be coming out on this channel soon. Please subscribe or follow my Twitch, or do neither of those. See you guys soon.